Thank you all so much for tuning in with us today here at the Unify Summit. Today we are joined by co-founder of AgeNation, George Cappannelli, who's an award-winning author, expert on individual, organizational, and societal change, and internationally known consultant who's worked with hundreds of the country's leading organizations in both the private and public sector. George's book, Do Not Go Quietly, has won 9 National Book Awards, along with his book, Authenticity, Simple Strategies for Greater Meaning and Purpose for Work and at Home, which we're going to dive into some of those strategies today, and his newest book, titled The Best Is Yet to Be, all available at their website at AgeNation.com. Hey, George, thanks so much for being here.
Good to see you, Nathan. Nice to be with you today.
Absolutely. So today we are talking about how our viewers can live, how all of us really can live our most authentic life. So I want to just dive right into it with you, George, with the first question of how do you, as an expert in so many of these areas, define authentic life?
Well, the word comes from the Greek authentikos, or the Latin authenticus, I guess, and it means original, unique, without peer. And so an authentic life is, for me, an original life. You know, it's, I like to say it's the life that we were born to live, not the life that we've been talked into living, not the life that somehow or another we arrived at a point where we felt we had to live, whether it was by circumstances or by pressure from society or our friends or whatever. It's the life that comes in with our heartbeat. You know, it's, I think, maybe you've heard me talk about it. There's Michael Meade is an anthologist and storyteller and a mythologist, and he's a remarkable guy. And one of the things that he reminds us of is that in indigenous tribes, when a child was born, it was the role of the elders to be present at the child's birth. And their role was to attempt to determine what was authentic and original about the gift that child had to give to the tribe. And then, as mentors and coaches, their job was to help raise the child so the child could develop that gift. And so that's why one of the definitions of education, which comes from the word educare, is to call forth within, from within, rather than learning from without. So an authentic life begins inside and comes with us, I believe, like a blueprint.
So it makes perfect sense, and I think it's so relative to all of us right now. And I'm curious, and what was that turning point for you in your life where you felt you made that shift into what you would call your own authentic life? What did that look like, and what was that experience for you?
Well, for me, it came when I discovered my art, because it separated me instantly from all of the things that I had done before. I had been a writer, and I'd done a lot of things that are called artistic. But when I discovered my love and my capacity to sculpt, it was like I stepped through a doorway. And when I did, I stepped into a place that was unique. It was original, and it felt somehow very familiar. It also changed my concept of time. For an example, when I began to work, both carving and modeling and all of the different forms of sculpting that I pursue, I realized that there was no longer a differentiation between the week and the weekend. The time suddenly was a continuum, and that literally, if I was really fortunate and I allowed all of the energy associated with that expression to come through me, maybe if I was really lucky in a lifetime, I would only be able to manifest a tiny fraction of the amount of creativity that was available to me.
Wow, it reminds me of when I was in high school and I started on my own path of self-discovery, if you will. And I'd been in sports all my life up to then, soccer, basketball, football, every sport there that I could take. And then all of a sudden I started skateboarding and was getting into trouble and doing some very mischievous things at the same time, whether they were related or not. I fell in love with skateboarding. It became my, 8, 12 hours a day. But my mom at that time was like, hell no, you're not skateboarding. This is going to destroy your life, and you're playing basketball. And she signed me up for basketball, and she really tried to force me to play basketball. And we got in a huge fight over it then. Now I understand. She was just trying to protect me. She loved me. She was trying to help me. But at the same time, what you're talking about is, if we backstep a little bit to the beginning of what you said, is, we all kind of come into life, and most of us, in any case, unless we're raised in a really conscious family, are dictated our terms of who and what we're supposed to be, right? The golfer, the basketball player, the theologist, the college student, the lawyer, the whatever. And what you're saying is, yes, that's the case, and we all have to find a way to break free of that to find out what is meaningful to us. And so for you, it's been your art and obviously your work. Go ahead.
Yeah, and once you begin to make that separation, then you begin to realize the number of ways in which you can make those separations. And you begin to realize how many of the beliefs that I began to realize, how many of the beliefs I was holding that weren't my beliefs. They were beliefs that belonged to other people, to the ebb and flow of society and to tradition and all the rest of it. And I started asking myself, whose beliefs are living you instead of whose belief am I living? And that's, I think, a fundamental question. That and doing whatever is necessary or possible to do to stay in touch with that inner vision, that inner dream.
So that leads us really in the next step is, how does somebody really uncover or discover what is truly authentic to them?
Well, first of all, I think so many mystics and teachers have told us that the key is to doing what you love. Because passion is like your guide path, that when you get out of passion with what you're doing, you realize that you're off track. And if you stay off too long, then you begin to wonder, where is my passion? Did I ever have it? So going back to the things that you love, the things that make you joyful, the things that make you curious, the things that excite you and fascinate you. That's the way to stay in touch with your dream. Not easy. I mean, nothing about this says it's going to be a cakewalk just because you discover something that you love to do. In fact, I think that's when the real hero's journey begins. That's when you have to decide how much of who you are you going to devote to the things that you love.
So what do you say to somebody who knows what they love? They're aware of it. They may love art or dance or music or whatever, a million things, right? But they have a million obstacles in their way from ever being able to actually experience or express that love for what they do. So it ends up going on the top shelf or in the closet and never gets pulling out. I mean, what words of encouragement would you say to people who are aware of what they love but maybe have no time or commitment or whatever?
Well, if you have no time, you have no commitment, then there's a large possibility that you're not going to live your dream. The hero's journey is about starting out. It's like you're on a balcony and you look out over this incredible garden, and at the other side of the garden you see this incredible place, and so you say to yourself, that's where I want to go. And you leave the balcony And all of a sudden you find yourself in the wilderness. You find yourself with all kinds of obstacles and whatnot. Well, the only people that succeed in the hero's journey are those who persevere. And they persevere against odds. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But it's not easy. And that's why those who do earn such respect from us. When we learn about the stories of people that persevere against the odds and finally get the Holy Grail, which is ultimately the inheritance of their innocence. And what is their innocence but a return to that place, to that dream that lives inside of one? So that's why I say it's not for sissies. It's not for people that expect, oh, good, I found my path. I'm going to start out, and within a couple of months, I'm going to make it, whatever making it means. It makes us our dream. It molds us and shapes us and ultimately gives us the opportunity to arrive, I think, at a place of such richness, such originality. But we have to earn it, you know?
I love the example of you're on the balcony looking out and you see the garden, and then you start walking there and you're in a forest with vicious animals coming to attack you and try to it's like it's so true, right? It's like we want it to be just easy, and I think it can be. I think when we're, at least in my experience, when we are doing what we love, right? When we are following that our heart's desire, our path towards our dream. You are going to obviously have challenges and complications and all that, but it seems that as long as you stay dedicated to it and committed to it for whatever reason, God, the universe, invisible beings, energies, whatever, help to open some of those doorways that seem impossible. As long as you go to the door and keep knocking and be willing to open it and walk through it, right? Is that true? Is that true for you?
And that commitment and that perseverance is an extraordinary thing, because it's not just a self-fulfilling prophecy, but it's a self-generating energy. As long as you're pointed toward the North Star of your dream, then the energy flows to you. But on the day that you start to turn away, you can feel the energy start to dissipate. And some people pursue that dream all of their lives, and they never achieve what the world might define as success. How many artists live their entire life and struggle, and then for decades and centuries afterward, their music is played, their art is adored, their books are read, whatever it happens to be. But the dream doesn't just have to be an artistic dream. It happened to be a path that was one of my paths. But people do it in medicine. They do it in teaching. They do it in raising a child. They do it, whatever that dream is, we have to follow it, not because of the goal at the end, but because the path is what enriches us.
Would you say that your why for your dream has to be so strong and so clear that it doesn't matter whether you get paid for it or not? It doesn't. I mean, you could do it free all the time you ever want to, because you have so much love for it. That it's not necessary. I mean, it is some people's dream to make millions and billions of dollars, and it's fine. But beyond that, beyond the financial, monetary dream, wouldn't you say that why for it has to be so strong that you wake up in the morning and it's against all odds, you go out and do it, whether you're getting respect, acknowledgement, payment, or not?
Well, some days, and then there are those days where the lack of those things certainly, are more obstacles you have to overcome. Carl Jung, the doctor of psychology, one of its founders, he used to say that his patients, those that achieved the greatest breakthroughs, were those that were motivated by a secret that either they could not describe or they would not share. And that secret, that quest, burned inside of them. and it burned in such a way that it pushed them beyond the obstacles that other people stopped at. You know, like you're a runner, you know, how many times do you get to that place in a run where you say to yourself, I've had enough, I'm not going to, and then what do? You break through that barrier, and then you're able to hit your second wind or your third wind. And I think that's a perfect analogy for the path that we're talking about, an original path. Because when you think about it, originality has nothing to compare itself to. It's easy if you're mimicking all of the things that other people have done before you, because you have all these road signs and markers along the way. But when you're really blazing a new frontier, you're opening up a new strategy in medicine, or a new concept in government or governance, or a new social system. You're going to get a lot of abuse, you know. I mean, really. And you're not one of those people necessarily that's going to break through suddenly in an IPO and get $80 billion and own half the Western world, although you can, because some of the individuals who have made those breakthroughs in technology and innovation have been rewarded in that way. But the true hero's journey, as you said, is one where the goal is inside. There's a Harvard psychologist, Frank Garfield, and when NASA was created, when Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon within a decade, and the fledgling people at NASA looked at one another and said, what the hell is he talking about? Garfield was brought in to study what would make ordinary people do extraordinary things. And what he discovered was that it wasn't tangible things. It wasn't pay raises or career achievements or acknowledgments or any of those things. It was a sense of something larger than life that needed to be accomplished. And that's what he found again and again caused ordinary people to do extraordinary things.
A sense of something larger than life is what...
Yeah, something that wouldn't necessarily be something that I would necessarily accomplish in my life, or that I would see a necessary return on in my life, but that still there was something about it that spurs me on. I mean, I've now made a tremendous crossover, that my writing and my art is very similar. The words I put in paper are like the strokes I take with a chisel against wood. And I realize that there are days that I wonder why I write, and I realize that I don't know who I'm writing for always. I don't know whether it's some one person or it's someone in some other decade. I'm finding that as I get to this time in my life, a lot of the work that I did earlier in my life is becoming more relevant now than it was when I created it, you know?
No, I love that, and I think it's fascinating because, you know, people who get into like writing, authors, for example, or speakers or presenters or anybody who's an educator, as soon as they start taking any kind of, you know, marketing style writing classes, they're going to tell you, you know, figure out who you're writing to, picture them, and they do it from a marketing standpoint, right? So you can sell more books. It's like, you know, be precise and word things this way. And what I hear you saying, and what makes sense to me, is maybe by doing that you could potentially be limiting your own creativity, your own flow, your own what feels right to you, because now you've taken your passion and your gift and you're starting to put it into a box as you start limiting it to who it's for. And yet you're writing because you just love to do it. And I've read your books. I mean, I consider you and Sedina just family to me, and I consider a part of your family and dear friends and colleagues. And, you know, I've read your books and obviously know a lot about your work and get to see your sculptures and the work that you do. And I see the love and the passion and the creativity that flows in that. And I don't think you can get that if you start putting all of your creativity into a box. right? It's like how do you do that? How do you open your creative spout and just let it flow through without caring, whether it reaches anybody or not? It's just your passion.
Well, again, I don't want to mislead people. Everybody cares. I don't think you have a creative expression so that it stays in a box or a closet or on a shelf unread or unseen or whatnot. But if it's not read as quickly or seen, or if it doesn't achieve the kind of external focus that we think it ought to, we still, if we're connected with our dream, we still go on. And the older I have gotten, I have a trilogy of novels. I worked on this trilogy for 15 years. And right now, I feel like it says exactly what I want it to say. I have no idea. It's now finally out with my agent looking for a home. I have no idea whether it's going to find the right home, whether it's going to be published and a few hundred copies or a few thousand copies are sold. But I know that what I have written says what I want it to say about the topic that is developed and explored in this novel. So for me, there's a peace that I feel, even though 15 years of my life, not every single day, but over the course of 15 years, I wrote these 3 books, and I rewrote them and I kept rewriting them. And now they're at a place where I love these books because they say what is part of the message I have to communicate.
This is truly a fascinating conversation, and I want to thank you. And we're going to go deeper here in a moment and get into some practical things people can do. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Hang with us.
Here at Unify Festival in New Mexico. Beautiful gathering in its first year. I can't even imagine what it will be like next year.
This weekend has been one of the most magical experiences of my festival career.
I still feel like I haven't explored enough after 3 days, so it was awesome.
It has been the most inspiring and heart-centered festival I have ever been to.
Okay, we're back. We're here talking with George Cappannelli, co-founder of AgeNation, and we've really had a fascinating conversation about really how to live your most authentic life and what that means and how to find your authenticity and discover it and uncover it, and then how to maybe take it off that top shelf and bring it into the forefront of your life to start making it a reality. Now, George, I want to ask you, kind of in a broad spectrum, what are some of the benefits you've seen as you see people actually start stepping into their more genuine and true and authentic self, and how have you seen that change other people's lives in a good way?
Well, first of all, they begin to inherit more joy. And secondly, I find that they inherit more energy, more engagement, and they also inherit more responsibility for the world that they live in. Because they begin to better understand the interconnectedness of life. One of the things we're seeing today, for an example, in Washington and a lot of our state capitals, we're seeing people who are not connected to their dreams. They're connected to a set of beliefs. So they are, for me, the hollow men, the empty suits, who are disconnected from their hearts and disconnected from other human beings. They don't have compassion, they don't have understanding, they don't have empathy, because all of those things require connectivity to one's heart, to one's passion, to one's dream. And the other thing that I've seen is that when somebody is connected to their dream, they're really supportive of other people's dreams. They're not interested in limiting or taking other people's dreams away. They're interested in adding empowerment and encouragement to it. So energy, creativity, fascination, curiosity, wonder, passion, and deeper connectivity to what I would call source or God or the whole, oneness.
Yeah, I mean, I have to... one, thank you for that, and I totally agree. And two is, it was about, I don't remember, it was probably about 6 years ago, so it must have been 2011, I think. 2010, 2011. And I was on this path of, I had this huge opportunity in front of me to start being one of the main guys or whatever, teaching and sharing and guiding and consulting for like 100,000 business owners, entrepreneurs, and sales and marketing. So I had my book I'd written coming out, ready to publish, had an online course. I really got into kind of sales and marketing education at that time, and I'd been really researching it for like 5-6 years and experimenting and getting some really good results for entrepreneurs. And something inside of me, as I was like ready to say yes to this, it started telling me, no. And I had this conflict within myself at that time. And luckily I had been meditating and on the spiritual journey most of that time leading up to it, 5 or 6 years. So I knew enough at that time to sit down in meditation and really figure out what was going on. And when I asked, the answer that came to me was so clear was, number one, no, that's not your path. It was given to you so that you know that that's possible and you can achieve those things. But two is, because then I said, well, what do I do from here? I got to pay the bills. I got to feed my family. I've got, we just had our daughter and all these things. And it said, open a free community online supporting the things you love the most. And at that time, the things I really loved the most were not necessarily sales and marketing. They were health and healing and spirituality and meditation and conscious living. So against all odds, if you will, and against my logical mind, I said no to the opportunity and jumped into this path. I had no idea how we were going to make money or anything, so we opened this free online community. The reason I'm sharing this story is for those people who are listening that may have something similar going on, that, jumping into a new experience of your heart's desire and your passion and what you love can be a scary thing, especially if you don't know if it's going to be able to support you or not. But I'm a testament, and I know you're a testament, George, and so is Sedina and the work you do, that when I jumped into that, all of a sudden things started lining up. And things started coming together, and I just kept moving forward with it. And we started with one person in the Panacea community, and now we have 60,000, and we've touched over 1 million people's lives in a positive way all over the world. And so, I just want to share that because I know the same thing for you, George, as you sit and you write and you teach and you share. It's like you're an incredible writer and very inspiring and very practical. And as you start putting that onto paper and into videos and so forth, as somebody comes along, you don't necessarily know how you're impacting their life in such a profound way, but you're doing it all the time. And I think that's key, right? Is stepping outside of ourself and going towards that bigger dream and committing to it and saying, you know what, if I can just even help one person a day or do something, make somebody smile with what I'm doing or somebody feel good, that can be a huge achievement by itself, right? It doesn't have to be a huge global impact.
No, it doesn't. And, you were saying what are practical steps, and you just identified several. One of them is to stop, go inside, and ask. The second thing is to have the wit to listen. And then the third thing is to have the courage to act on what you hear. Now, those are three really important and valuable pieces. A lot of people stop, some smaller percentage ask, and an even smaller percentage listen, and then an even smaller percentage have the courage to act on what they hear. So, I mean, a path to authenticity is in those steps right there. And again, I really want to point out, over the course of a lifetime, there are a lot of cycles. And even though you're doing the thing that you long to do and want to do, doesn't mean you're not going to go through fallow periods where you feel like you're yelling into the wind. And that's why so many people drop off the ladder, because those places happen periodically, So the going into the silence, trusting what you hear, really listening, and then acting on it, knowing that you're going to be tested. And that's the juice. I mean, Jesus, if you weren't tested and you got to the end of the path, you'd look back and you'd say, is that all there is? But when you're tested and you really, you're willing to learn from what you're being tested with, and you're willing to acknowledge what you don't know, and you're willing to go to the places that you have to go to learn, boy, that's the best game in town. In fact, in many ways, it's the only game in town. Because I like to say that, life is a school, and we never graduate. We're just always taking new classes and learning new things. And each phase of life, you and I and Sadina have been talking about this a lot with Higher Ground and whatnot. We're talking about the fact that old stories die and new stories are born. And right now we're in one of those tumultuous periods where a giant old story is shaking and baking and dying right in front of our eyes. It may take a while for it to completely implode, but right along with it, there's this wonderful new story that's rising, and it's the kind of story we're talking about. It's a story that's going to be born from authenticity, from originality, and from each of us committing to our dreams. It's not going to be born by people simply getting in line like automatons and following the person ahead of them, because we know where that leads to, dissipation of energy and dissatisfaction and the desire to acquire and consume more from outside of ourselves instead of being fed from the only source that has any value, and that's inside of us.
Yeah, and I think that's why I started running recently, beginning of this year, is because I get that entire life experience in 3 or 4 hours, right? It's like go through the joy of getting started, and then all of a sudden you hit some walls and some challenges, and it's like, oh God, when is this over? And then all of a sudden at the end you're lifted up again, and at the end of it all, when you turn around and look at what you just did, it's like, this is the most amazing thing I could have done with my day today. And I love how you explained it, because it's so true that it is most important for all of us right now, that if we are experiencing those challenges, and I know I'm certainly rebounding from one of the biggest challenges and failures in my professional career that I've ever had, and I'm very positive about the future now. While I wasn't a couple of months ago, I am now, because I can see what needs to be done. Remaining positive and focused on what we're really trying to achieve. And so, in your book, Authenticity, you just shared 3 of those steps, which I know you go much deeper to in the book. What are some other huge takeaways that people can get from your book, Authenticity, and helping build that resilience for moving forward?
Well, we talked about some earlier, identifying what we really truly believe, where the beliefs come from. and eliminating those beliefs that, because a mother or a father, a coach, a priest, a minister, somebody told you this was the thing you needed to believe. Well, if you think about gardening, you're into sustainability. So you have a small plant and you put a stake in to help it stabilize itself. But, if you were to walk past a redwood and there was a little stake beside it with a string around it, it would look pretty stupid. So as we grow, we got to shed the places that we've been told you stop here, you turn left, you do that. And that's where the originality gets discovered. We realize that if we turn right instead of left, or sit down or stand up or whatever it is, something new happens, a new perspective, a new point of view. So shedding old beliefs, inheriting new ones, being willing to test. Remembering that love by any other name is not love, that we can't kid ourselves or cheat ourselves, even if we have to do something. As you said before, I have a new daughter, I have responsibilities. Yes, we do have those things to do. So either learn to love the thing you do or do a different thing. So that's another key that we talk about. Conversations with ourselves. It used to be that people laughed at people that talked to themselves because those were the crazy ones, But in reality, those are the smart ones. Because when we talk to ourselves rather than listening to all the noise and stuff around us, we have a chance of actually staying in touch with our wisdom.
Yeah, you just don't want to argue with yourself out loud in public. That's all.
Well, that's not necessarily true. Robin Williams used to do it and was very successful, if you think about it. I also think we wrote another book called Say Yes to Change. And so Sadina and I are very big on the idea of saying yes to new possibilities, to new opportunities, to new people, to new ideas. Because unfortunately, the older many of us get, the more calcified we get. And in that way, we stop saying yes to life and we start kind of living too much in the past or anticipating too much in the future. This is where it happens, and this is where the yes has to happen. That's that thing you were talking about. When you say yes, new opportunities, new people, new circumstances come into play, and you begin to live differently.
And I think most people watching this really, get and have probably known for a long time that they need to say yes to new opportunities, to changing themselves and all of that. But I think what a lot, at least in my experience in talking with people, is that one of the things that actually prevents people from fully committing to that yes is fear. Is the fear around, what if I say yes? And so, what are some words of wisdom or advice you would say around, how do people overcome that fear so that yes can actually be embodied?
Well, I think Nike has the solution there. It's called Just Do It. Because unless you do something, you never know what the result is going to be. And, there are so many trite analogies, but it's like the little kids standing at the edge of the pool and just terrified of jumping in. We used to do a lot of corporate outdoor adventure courses for leading executives, and we'd take them climbing and do rappelling. And the staging area for a rappel is just generally a few feet at the top of a cliff. And while they're getting roped up and putting harnesses on and helmets, that's where all the fear comes up. And they stand at the edge with their back to the cliff and to the drop. But as soon as they start down, this thing happens on their face, this incredible joy happens. And that little place is where all the fear is before you begin something. But once you get in motion, that's where the joy is. So how do you do that? You do it. There just isn't any other way around it. You can never get in the water unless you get in it. You can never taste the pie unless you taste it, or whatever it happens to be. And in many ways, this is all platitude, and yet it's fundamental truth.
Well, and I think you addressed something huge in relation to this a little bit ago, where you said the conversations with ourself, right? Because the conversation with yourself, when you're in that scenario, repelling or starting a new company or leaving your current job because you absolutely hate it or whatever it is, the conversation with yourself, if there's fear involved, is what if I do this? What's the negative thing that can happen? I can lose my income. My wife could divorce me. That, right? It's just that negative conversation. But by being aware of our conversation, we then need to change it. Yes, what are the good things that could happen from this? What if I'm successful at it? What if I actually do it and achieve success? How great would that be? And so, I think what you said earlier.
And also, what if I don't have an expectation? What if I get curious? What if I get moment by moment curious as I stand facing the cliff, and then I turn around? What if I'm just monitoring what's going on? What if I'm discovering and paying attention as I do it moment by moment, instead of getting ahead of myself? Because that's where the projection comes in, and that's where the false expectation comes up. But if we're just staying present where we are, we discover that there's never anything we can't handle in what we're doing right at this moment. The I can't handle it comes up when you don't know what the next step is, and you get caught in the gap between where you are and where you're going to be. So curiosity and presence are the other keys to being able to deal with anything. I mean, how many times have we dreaded a conversation, and then after it has begun, we realize we're learning something, we're creating greater intimacy, we're finally dealing with an old pattern we have, or whatever the hell it happens to be, and then all of a sudden we discover that conversation was such a rich thing, and yet we resisted it sometimes for weeks, months, or years. So becoming an observer, and becoming an observer to what's present.
Beautiful. I love it. George, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your eloquence, for just your way of describing things. I just want to honor and appreciate you for all you've done for so many people around the world, and through your books and your work and everything you do. So thank you so much for being here with us on the summit.
You're welcome, Nathan, and thanks for all the great work you're doing. This is tremendous. It's tremendous to give people the opportunity to learn from each other, because basically we all stand on each other's shoulders, and none of us created it by ourselves, but each of us can take it one more step, one more note toward authenticity.
Beautiful. Well, that's all we have for you all tuning in today. Thank you all so much for being here. I encourage you to go to AgeNation.com and pick up a copy of Authenticity, as well as Do Not Go Quietly, and take a look at the work George and Sadina are doing at AgeNation, and see how you can get involved. Also take a look at HigherGroundInstitute.com, and you'll see some incredible resources and programs you can take a look at there as well that George and Sadina and myself are collaborating on. And again, George, it's just been an honor to connect with you. I learn from you all the time, and I appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone tuning in got some great nuggets of wisdom. So thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.